You're on mute. No one can hear you. There you go. You're back.
Oh,
No one
hi,
heard
Chris.
you, but I'm
Thank
sure
you for
everyone
being
can
here.
imagine what it was. How you doing?
Yeah, things happen sometimes. Uh,
It's
okay,
fine. It's
so
normal.
I will just take a minute to go back and let the people read who did not. And but since your slide will also have an introduction, I'll just go off off to you.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us all here today. It's great to see if you're kind of watching this live, it'd be great to hear where you're joining from. So please do leave a kind of message in the comments and kind of let us know where you're joining from today. Cool. Should we kick off with the slide deck if you're able to share that up? Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Great, cool. So we've done that bit. Cool. So, yeah, to kick things off, my name is Chris Nesbitt-Smith. I'm based in London. I currently work with some kind of well-known brands like LearnKate, Control Plane, eSynergy, and also some various bits of kind of UK government. I'm a tinkerer of open source stuff as well. I've been using Kubernetes and abusing it in production since it was 0.4. So, believe me when I say it's been a journey. I've certainly got the scars to show for it. So we'll have some time at the end for questions and your best heckles. If not, then please do kind of hit me up on LinkedIn or something afterwards. So the history of pets versus cattle terminology is muddy, but most link to a presentation made by Bill Baker from Microsoft made in 2006 around scaling the SQL server. So way back then, in the before times, we called ourselves sysadmins and we treated our servers like pets. So for example, Bob, or the mail server, if Bob goes down, it's all hands to the pumps. The CEO isn't getting his email. It's equivalent to the end of the world. So we do some incantations, make some sacrifices at an altar and resuscitate Bob, bringing him back from the dead. Crisis averted, cue the applause and accolades for our valiant sysadmins who stayed up late into the night. In the new world, however, servers are numbered or maybe kind of UIDs or GUIDs like cattle in a herd. So, for example, when Web 01 to Web 100, so when one of those goes down, it's taken out the back, shot and replaced on the line. But why am I telling you this kind of rather morbid story? Well, Kubernetes deals with all these problems, right, and saves us from the tyranny. Well, you're right, it does. All your computers are called nodes and they're abstracted and given arbitrary names. Auto-scaling groups and such will automatically detect the sick in your flock, take them out, and bring a replacement in, all while seamlessly-ish rescheduling the workload that was on the failed computer. And Kubernetes takes that a step further as well. So your workload also then has unique names. Like the physical servers, your workload failures can be detected and replaced seamlessly. So where's the pet, you might ask? Well, what's the first thing we do with a brand new, shiny new Kubernetes cluster? Hint, I'll give you a hint. It's not like deploying your application or anything that the business cares about. Something like that look maybe vaguely familiar? Well, we had to do a load of things just to make this cluster able to start running our workloads. And it's worth noting here that with a trend towards more and more features being kind of out of tree, which is to say they're optional add-ons and don't ship with core Kubernetes. So example of these are things like flex volumes, policy, and basically all the Kubernetes SIG projects that many often then find essential is only exacerbating this problem. So that might work when you've got, say, just one single cluster. But what about when you've got dev, integration, staging, and QA that your application needs to run on? Or worse, when you need separation between your teams or products. So maybe you've automated that and you've got some Bash, Ansible, Terraform, whatever you like. Cool, good for you. However, you'll find it won't be long before there's then an updated version of something, perhaps patching a vulnerability that you care about, and you may be stuck trying to test every single app across your estate. So this is what we're calling kind of day two operations. We used to call it BAU or business as usual, and it's where ultimately reality starts catching up with our idealistic good intentions. So you'll quickly find that the clusters are running various versions given the rate of change in the community. It's unrealistic to run kind of latest everywhere confidently without breaking production and disrupting your operational teams. permutations of sensitive or seemingly common tool choices. So some teams might use Kong, others Nginx, others Apache, all for totally good reasons. Therefore, seemingly infinite possibilities across the estate emerge. Sad times, right? Well, congratulations, you're now the proud owner of a pet shop. Or if you manage to automate the creation, you can call it a pet factory. But I'd argue it's still a headache. So what, you might say, well, how does this hurt you? You might ask, well, maybe you like pets. Well, presuming, of course, you're in cloud, your world could roughly be all summarized into tiers. So apps, well, these are things that your kind of boardroom know about and can probably name. So think your public website, shopping cart system, customer service app, online chat interfaces, email systems, etc. These are implicitly providing some value in of themselves to your customers. Infrastructure, well, with cloud, this is kind of commodity. Thankfully, the days of where anyone in your business caring about the challenges of physically racking up hardware, not overloading the weight in the cabinet, taking pride in how well they've routed the cables, have hopefully all passed. And we're consuming infrastructure that we've hopefully, bad luck, codified. But this is, and you've hopefully codified. But even if you're into ClickOps, making sure it's running is then not really your problem. No one in your business, therefore, should be concerned with kind of hardware failures, patching routers every time there's a critical vulnerability, testing the UPS and the generators regularly, updating the air conditioning when you add more servers to it. Yornorama, as my 16-year-old would say, and then curse me for repeating. Well, your interactions with any of this ultimately become a few clicks or lines of code away, and some of that infra is then available to you with a service level agreement attached to it. If only the story ended there, though. Sandwiched between those is a grey layer of all the operational enablers, and it's where your DevOps or SRE team live. So think log aggregation, certificate issuers, security policies, monitoring, service mesh, and many more. Well, these are all the things you do because of the sorts of reasons ranging from risk mitigation to emotion and technically unqualified opinion, or just without foresight of what was around the corner in 6 months. Let's just make the leap and assume for a minute you are more technically competent than your Goliath multi-billion-dollar cloud vendor. You've completely negated, however, many of the benefits of going to cloud in the first place by ripping up the shared responsibility model. All of this, whilst technically fascinating for people like me to stand and stroke my beard at, this is delivering absolutely zero business value, unless, of course, your business is building or training on those products. And who'd want to get into that crazy business? But that's not all. Recruitment. So you might think that you want a DevOps, right? Oh, no, wait, a DevOps with Kubernetes experience. So maybe a CKA. Oh yeah, it's on AWS and we use Linkerd in some places, Istio, no, not the current version, or even the same version everywhere, a mix of pod and pod security policy, Caverno and OPA for policy, some Terraform, Helm, Jenkins, GitHub Action Soup all going on, all in a mono repo, apart from all the stuff that's not. We're well outside of the remit of commodity skills and we're back to hunting unicorns. Sure, you might find some candidates that you'll hire. Well, now you've got one hell of an onboarding issue. So before they can start doing anything useful and help your business move forwards faster than it did without them, and if you've hired some smart people, well, lo and behold, they'll come with their own experience and their own opinions of what worked for them before. So your landscape obviously starts getting bigger and more complex and diverse. So I did some Googling. This is what the CNCF landscape looked back in the heady days of 2017. Choices, right? Choices and logos as far as the eye can see. Have you seen it recently, though? So this has got a bit out of hand. I'd say someone ought to have a word, but I suspect that would make probably things worse by adding yet another thing. And don't get me started on operators. I mean, nice idea, but they betray any of the ideals of immutability with crazy levels of abstraction and have you seen the crazy of mutating admission controllers too? And if you're really mad, you can nest these things all together with operators that create CRDs for other operators that are all mutated. And heaven forbid someone bumps the version of anything. All no doubt held together with some sticky tape, chewing gum, glue, pipe cleaners, thoughts and prayers, and Helm. A string-based templating engine where any commodity module has to eventually expose every parameter in every object file abstracted by a glorified string replace. So now I've got to have in my head all of the complexities of a Linux or Windows host, how the container runtime works, the software-defined network, the storage, the hypervisor of the container, the scheduler controls, the auth and the policy and the mutating policy and the cluster, before I worry about how someone in the nested Helm chart mess of hell has mapped the replica count of one of the deployments to a string called db replica count, and how that has changed a new version of a dependency not following semver to database replica count. So instead of having my expected 3, I've now only got 1. When I could have just written a YAML patch for the replica count in the deployment object of the database resource using stable API versioning with a schema validation for free. Oh, the kids just doing Kubernetes just don't seem to have learned from the past. Don't get me wrong, I love the open source community with all my heart. It's so important. And it's simply just not possible to do anything without it. Sorry, not sorry. Yes, as a sidebar, every talk this year is contractually by the organizers required to reference log4j. This is my slide, this is my meme. It's not relevant. It can come out in a couple of months and we'll all be better off for it. But everything, literally everything that exists around us depends upon it. And the community is brilliant at building some truly remarkable, very high quality things. But we must come to terms with that the open source community is awful at packaging things up in this way for consumption, introducing needless abstractions. But enough of that. I'm definitely going to hell for slagging all of those off. So happy place, Chris, happy place. Well, yes, where was I? Okay, so through all of this, I can't possibly think of a faster way to go from enthusiastic engineers playing with some exciting new tech to deeply unhappy ones trying to fix something at 4 a.m. And before they can do anything meaningful, they've got an orienteering exercise to switch mental context to whatever the intended permutation of the things is that they're trying to be looking at. Meanwhile, your business value delivering apps are offline or potentially worse at breach. Rewind a minute though. We didn't want any of these things. How did we get here? And what can we do about it? Well, honestly, bin it all. Kill it with fire. And then learn to love vanilla. Vanilla is great and delicious too. Does anyone remember Kiss? No, not the band, but keep it stupid simple, or keep it simple stupid. And learn to embrace the shared responsibility model that's on offer from your cloud vendors and make them do more than just provide you compute. Turns out, as it happens, they're not that bad at it. And I'm not daft. I know it's not sexy and exciting, and you might even find recruitment initially a bit harder if you're used to hunting magpies who follow the shiny and don't look like boring stuff that works. So to consider some of the questions asked earlier of like, is it time to put your pet Kubernetes cluster down? Yes, it is. And in the immortal worlds of S Club 7, if you can bring it on back immutably from code, all without anyone noticing, I'm referring to the original version of those lyrics, then maybe, just maybe, it can earn the right to stay to die another day. I've been Chris Nesbitt-Smith. Thank you again so much for joining me today and enduring my kind of self-loathing rant. Like, subscribe, whatever the kids do on LinkedIn, GitHub, whatever, and you can be rest assured there'll be no spam or pretty much content at all, since I'm awful at self-promotion, especially on social media. cns.me just points to my LinkedIn, and talks.cns.me contains this and some other talks, and they are all open source. Questions are very welcome on this. I'll be hanging around for a bit. I'll kind of hang around for a while, or find me on LinkedIn afterwards. I need to probably kind of have a sit down and kind of recover from being kind of so grumpy. But thank you so much for coming and joining me today.
Hello, everyone. We are open for questions. We see a few comments here. I will add them on the screen so Chris can have a look too.
So yeah, what's the whole point that you want to tell? Yeah, just stick to vanilla Kubernetes and embrace the shared responsibility model. We tend to bite off a lot more than we can chew, and take a lot of responsibility off what you could just say is the cloud vendor's problem, right? So if you just say this is Azure, AWS, GCP, Oracle, Alibaba, whatever cloud you're in, and allow them to actually kind of look after the things that they're supposed to look after. So my kind of pet peeves are things like service mesh, for example, that you are abstracting and making a networking stack more difficult, for example, or running your own bits of certificates and things like that, and trying to run your own PKI, and all sorts of like bits of gubbins that you do that your cloud vendor may not have all of the shiny, really exotic, esoteric features that you might desire. But if you're going to do those choices, make a really conscious decision that it's worth the upkeep. It's not just as simple as just to run it and deploy it once. I often refer to this as, and the realization often lands with people, mostly in the kind of management tiers of software's not an asset that you build. If you're selling a product, sure, the product is an asset because you built a thing and you're reselling it. But if you're building something for your own business, I don't know, like a e-commerce website system, that's not an asset, right? It's a liability. Put it in the right column on the balance sheet. Recognize the fact that what you have is you've got a liability that you need to feed, water, patch, maintain, look after, keep up to date. You've got to employ people to look after some servers or to look after your kind of public cloud infra, all the things like that. What do you think of how the way Azure is doing on market? Not sure quite what you mean by the question. You can maybe clarify what that really means.
Okay.
Doing so much of an abstraction on the tools of open source AKS and all. Again, it's a product. You buy a product and consume the products. Yeah, the point was, doing so much of the abstraction on the tools of open source AKS and all. Yeah, like manage cloud, like embrace the things. So if you go with like Azure, I can't know AWS is better, but like say like in AWS land, you embrace things like S3 and Dynamo over things where you're paying for, and you've got to be more involved with the operational things. So like actually kind of look at and understand the shared responsibility model. So am I responsible for like patching this thing, updating it, managing the security perimeter of it, wiring it up to all sorts of bits of controls, dealing with kind of access control? Is it like a machine that I've got to manage the SSH keys on it and all of that jazz? Or can I just actually put all of that onus on a 24/7 operation that can do that way better, and support follows the same, and that's a paid for service that AWS, Azure, GCP can handle access management infinitely better than I could ever do, and embrace that. So embrace any of the managed services that might be exotic implementations, might be something that's not an abstraction of an open source, might just be a vended product, like a serverless product or Lambda or whatever, that's not a easy, tangible thing that you can then port elsewhere, but respect the value of that. Actually, they'll look after it for you. If that helps answer some of your point.
Okay. Any more questions? I think Shravan got his answer. It's not here yet. Okay, so I have a question follow up. So, are you suggesting that going vanilla with larger projects is actually a better approach?
I didn't hear the last bit of that. Going vanilla for what? Sorry.
For larger projects is a better approach?
Yeah, even more so.
Won't it be a little more clutter?
A little more what? Sorry.
Won't it be a little more clutter?
I don't see why necessarily. I mean, it's less things and embrace the bits that your cloud vendor's doing rather than trying to run stuff yourself. So, like if AWS offer a thing and you're in AWS or Azure, or pick whichever vendor you're in, and they offer a thing that is even half of what you need, probably preference that over trying to deliver something and run it yourself. Because say it's not software is not just a thing that you install on a computer and run it once, or install it on a cluster and run it once. You do it and then you've got to upkeep it. You've got to patch it. We live in a world where vulnerabilities are very fast paced and moving. You need to be able to patch it on a dime, and that'd be a complete no brainer to do. Now, developing that as a competency for not just your own stuff, but all of your supply chain and all the other bits of periphery stuff in that gray tier in the middle, that's not anything that's delivering any value to your business. Well, and therefore is hard to justify. It's hard to justify to the business. Oh, I'm going to spend the next week updating things on the CI platform. And they go, well, how is that going to affect my profit margin? It's like, well, doesn't. So therefore, don't do that. I want you to work on some actual kind of value add things that my customers will see. And then you go off and do that, and then you increase the technical debt. Whereas if you'd made a decision earlier just to go with a SaaS delivered, say in this case, CI platform or a database or whatever, go with that. Don't try and do like silly things. Like don't try and run databases in your Kubernetes cluster. Just don't do it. I can't comprehend a possible rational reason why you would want to have that burden of looking after those things when you're in a cloud vendor. Like if you were on-prem, sure, fine. It's probably one of the lesser ugly ways to do it. If you can't go and buy a physical appliance to do the thing for you, if you're on-prem, cool, you're not got much choice. Suck it up. If you're in cloud, you've got vendors where you just kind of go, I want a database, I want an object store, I want a thing, and it's all there, and they look after it, and there is a shared responsibility model that you can embrace and take benefit from your business.
Yeah, I kind of get half of the point, but like if let's say I am not going entirely vanilla, and there are certain aspects of my project which I am depending on a third-party vendor for, right? That is again, isn't that bringing in a little more complexity to the project instead of actually using well-documented open source projects which more people have eyes on instead of just a closed team, which is the case with most SaaS products?
I'd still obviously do your due diligence on the vendor, but I would still preference SaaS. I think it can be a SaaS offering of an open source product. There are plenty. Like you can get Postgres as a service, you can get whatever, right, or Minia as a service or whatever. I could let them look after it. They're way better at it than your I work in massive organizations where there are thousands of engineers knocking all over the place. I would still, at that scale, still say that like the cloud vendor will do a far better job. They will have a real separation of responsibility. So in the scenario of like a breach, there are far more tangible things where it actually does require many different teams to collude in order to carry out an attack. Whereas if it's all running within your organization, unless you've got thousands and thousands of people all spread all over the planet, you are not in a position to be able to say that any one person can't leak all of the data, right? Or can't take all the credit cards, or can't do a transaction to their own bank account, or whatever it might be, and potentially even pin it on someone else. So if you're running like the logging service, well, whoever's got access to the logging service can change the logs to point the finger at someone else. There's no reputability in any of those logs. Whereas if you've gone to a SaaS vendor, you can be satisfied, well, they've got little motive and direction, and they don't fit into your threat model of why their logs would be wrong. You've shipped them out as fast as you can. Therefore, you've got an assurance that that is doing what it's doing. And the same thing over any of your your bits of data and any of your run of your service. For the same reason that you probably go and do, I want an AKS cluster, as opposed to I want a bunch of VMs and I want to run kind of use KubeADM or something that's, or KubeSpray or something like that to spin up Kubernetes on those VMs. No, you go with the managed things because you know that you can benefit from them looking after the control plane and looking after the controls around those perimeter bits.
Yeah. So basically, you mean like don't try to reinvent the wheel. If someone is doing it good, go with that. Standing on the shoulders of giant kind of concept.
Yeah, there's certainly an element of that, but like I say, like open source is fantastic. I don't get me wrong; like, it is really good. However, the recognition needs to be taken that you running that product, that open source project or product, that comes with a burden. It's not just start it up like kubectl apply at the end or Helm install, and then that's the end of the journey for that. That thing needs to be patched. It is at that point it starts becoming an accruing liability, and if you're not accounting for it properly, it will hurt you. And in the current climate of the sorts of kind of direction of attack, that's probably not very long until it does. So weeks and months. It used to be years, decades. Now it's kind of weeks and months before it will probably hurt you.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have any more follow-up questions, and I don't see much happening in the comments right now. Whoever is watching and would want to get in touch, we have Chris here. His handle is visible, and you can have a conversation. So we'll go off now. We'll call this done for today.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks for coming.